Welcome to this evening. Really excited to see so many people coming on a Sunday evening, so thank you so much. I'm Barbara Holding from Canine HS Courses, and I work at Canine Hydro Services. And this is going to be a monthly live event through 2019 to share ideas and to get together. And I think it's just a brilliant way to connect up because we're all such hardworking canine therapists, and it can be a little isolated at times, and I get asked so many questions, so I was hoping we can share ideas. Oh, hi Joe, don't worry if you're a bit late, I've only just started, no worries at all. And a few more people joining in, so please, I thought I'd just orientate you around crowdcasts in a minute. I'm a newbie to it as well, and I love it. So a little bit about me, I'm a veterinary physiotherapist, and I specialise in canine rehabilitation and hydrotherapy and fitness and conditioning programs for dogs. In fact, dogs are my life outside my family. And if you want to know a little bit more about my background, you can go to Canine HS Courses and have a look at the About Us section. I have a great team at Canine Hydro Services that I'm so fortunate that work with me. And we want to share some of the things we're doing because we are getting the most amazing results. Just checking in there. So 2 things I love, clinical practice, and yes, I'm still in clinical practice and I love it. And then also I love sharing and teaching and doing some training courses. So I'm an accredited clinical educator and I combine the 2. And I feel this is going to be a great forum. Thank you so much to all the messages and support. I was really overwhelmed with the first crowdcast that we did in November, looking at harnesses and flotation devices. Honestly, it took my breath away and I kind of felt we'll give this another shot. So just to orientate you a little bit with crowdcasts, there is a chat down in the bottom right where you can say hi Lorraine, hi Diana, Jane, yay to you too. And there's ask a question, which is along the bottom bar where you can ask the questions. And it's got a really cool feature. So if you don't hear all the answer or you want to listen to it again, you can, when you replay, just go to that question and it will take you to the exact spot in the chat. So I feel that's really good. You can also vote. So if there's a question there, you went, that's what I want to ask as well. If you vote on it, the ones with the most votes sit at the top. So we have upvoting. So make sure I answer as many questions as possible this evening. Hi Mel, great to see you. Hope you're feeling a bit better as well. And then we've also got a poll that was set up, and it's just a bit of fun to see whether your preference is an underwater treadmill, a hydrotherapy pool, or both, or you're not sure. So that again, just giving us a little bit. We've got 81 in the house, which is amazing. I was hoping for maybe 10 or 12. So I'll try and get through as many questions as I can. Okay. So tonight's topic is about looking at underwater treadmills and hydrotherapy pools for canine hydrotherapy. And it's a question I'm asked all the time. Maria, you've made it. Fantastic. And Patrick, hi from Belgium. We met a long time ago at the Royal Veterinary College, so that's great. Really good. A really great place to start is for you to think. So I'm old school. I have pen and paper down here, both sides, to make some little jotting notes and things. If you want to get a pad and paper, go and get that with your coffee now, and just orientate yourself a little bit around the crowdcast. A really good tip if you're having any problems with the volume. Thank you, Amy. I'll just put these in. Yeah, a really good tip is shut everything in your browser. If you shut everything in your browser, then you will find that you'll get a better streaming because it's streamed through the browser. Okay, so start at a good place. When we look at the level in hydrotherapy, the first unit, the first question is define hydrotherapy. And I think that's a really good place to start thinking about what it means to you, because it's changed so much and it continues to evolve all the time. And when we're learning in physiotherapy on all the different courses that they're running these days, it's something that we search for, a definition. So that's a good point to start. On all the courses that I'm involved with teaching, from level 3 up to level 7 and in the university, I also tag on, let's think about your practice ethos. So your practice ethos is something very different. It's not a mission statement. People who work in healthcare, they have a practice ethos which announces to the people that they're offering that service to about their ethical and professional beliefs. So have a think about what your practice ethos is and combine that with the definition. So for me, when I'm asked a question, I can never find an answer straight away. So this is a bit of a test for me. And a good way for definitions, if you start with keywords. So put down a whole load of keywords, what hydrotherapy means to you at the moment. And then you can start mashing it up and find your definition, because there's lots of different definitions. They're always changing, they're always evolving. So let's find something that's purposeful for current practice. So when you have a little think about historically, 10, 12 years ago, hydrotherapy was very much delivered outside of the products, outside of the hydrotherapy pool or outside of the underwater treadmill. The dog was in there, and it was really about perhaps swimming a dog in water, walking a dog on the treadmill. And we've so evolved from there in the UK. So it's really exciting times where therapists working in hydrotherapy are evolving and developing their therapeutic treatment toolbox. And we're wanting to have loads of assessment and therapeutic treatment tools in that box, because dogs are so different. It isn't about treating a condition, it's about treating the dog that has that condition and understanding the dog's behaviours, particularly if they're in pain, and in a very unusual place. They come into a clinical environment, so their behaviours are going to be very different to how they are at home. So I'm going to pull up, hi Becky, hi Chantel, oh Sarah, hello Sarah, great to see you this evening. So so I want you to have a think, what does hydrotherapy mean to you now? So for Canine Hydro Services, we've got a practice ethos, and it pivots around that we're very dog-centric and owner-focused. And what your practice ethos gives you is a reference point and an anchor, because there's so many influences and so many different ways to do treatments on dogs or with dogs, depending on your choice. And your practice ethos is your anchor and your reference point for you and your team to kind of go back to that point and say, is this treatment technique appropriate? Is it what we're wanting to do? Does it reflect our service that we're providing for the dogs and the owners? And, you know, the dogs in our care, for us, it's what it's all about. So current practice has really evolved into being an assessment-driven approach where we use reliable and valid assessment tools, and then we use clinical reasoning to devise that individual treatment program or treatment plan for each dog in our care. And it includes developing a home plan that's specific for that dog for the owner as well. And it's about working with the dog, not on the dog. I think we're evolving even further now, because we do know when we look down, we're going to have a deep dive into science, which is going to be really exciting. The most important thing is that we're dog-centric and we work with the dog. Not only for us is it links into our practice ethos, but it also gets amazing results in a very few sessions. And we want to share those treatment techniques with you. So looking at the different products, we're going to move into that, but let's just have a bit of a plunge into some science and talk about how dogs actually move. Yes, Becky, or Chantel, you can watch it on replay. Don't worry if your phone dies out, it's recorded and you can watch that straight away at the end, so no worries. So I'm just going to pull up the presentation. And for those of you who know me, IT is my mountain and I'm climbing that at the moment. And so there we go. Hopefully you can see that on your screen. Brilliant. And Just going to toggle it there. Okay, so this gorgeous dog, this lady, is 15 years old, and she loves the camera, and she loves me, and I love her. And every time I think about evolving or taking forward some new treatment techniques into the teaching environment that I work in, you know, I'm very focused on the dogs I've had the absolute joy to work with. So we need to have a little look about the biomechanics of dogs. And when I say that word, people get a little bit worried, but there's nothing to worry about, because dog design, how they're designed, is incredibly important to what product you're going to choose to work in as one of the factors. Well done, Lynn, you made it. I can see that coming through there. So what we do know is that the dog in natural balance, 2/3 of their body weight in natural balance stance goes through their forelimbs, and 1/3 of their body weight goes through their hind limbs. We also know they've got 4 legs for 2 reasons. To support them against gravity, and also to accelerate them forward in the sagittal plane, or accelerate them forward in a forward direction. That's their design, and it's really important as therapists that we work within the design constraints and not outside the design constraints. And that's why we would never walk or move a dog backwards, because they are designed to move forwards, and we wouldn't want to compromise some of their design features. Excuse me. So my favorite way to describe this is a car analogy that I've used for the last 20 years. It's something I find really exciting because it connects with people. We also know that the forelimbs are predominantly about shock absorbing and braking, and the hind limbs, and that's the forelimbs, that's related to how they're connected to the axial skeleton. And the hind limbs, their zigzag shape and the way they're connected with that really strong coupling at the sacroiliac joint. They're designed for having the car engine there. So the skeleton, I relate the skeleton directly to a chassis of a car. So I want you to think about your car that's parked outside, and just have this analogy to help you understand how dogs organize their movement. Because as therapists, whether you're a hydrotherapist, a physiotherapist, or dual, your concern is about devising a program to improve the movement, the function, the fitness, the conditioning of that dog. So let's hook straight into how the dog's designed so we get amazing results really quickly. So the skeleton gives the form, the shape. They come in all different sizes, like you have lots of different kinds of cars. And it protects. It has a lot of things it does, but what it doesn't do, it doesn't supply any power of movement. The wheels of the car represent the joints of the dog, and they are designed to promote and optimize forward motion. So just like you race down the motorway in your car forwards, not backwards, the dog is designed to move forwards. So when we're thinking about the design of products to work them in as therapists, that's reflected in some of the choice of the designs that we were going to see in a few more slides. And then we've really got to think, neither the joints nor the skeletons provide any power of movement. So where does the power of movement actually come from? And this is going to come from the muscle system. And the muscle system is really complex, and the engine of the dog sits in the rear when the dog is in natural balance. So what turns the engine on? Because your cars don't spontaneously turn on. You've got your electronics, which is represented by your car management system. And in the dog, this is called the proprioceptive system. So proprioception isn't something you get with neural problems. Proprioception is the fundamental way a dog actually moves. And this linked with your muscle power is how a dog moves. And you have 2 kinds of proprioception. You've got unconscious proprioception and conscious proprioception. And we can talk about that a little bit later as well. So the proprioceptive system, it's really straightforward. You've got a bunch of receptors. They're like satellites. They take in information that's incoming traffic. They've got receptors are located in lots of places. And these proprioceptors in the dog, they've got specialist ones in their eyes. They've got loads in their paws. They've got them in muscles, joints, ligaments. And we have a lot of sensory receptors we can hook into in the skin as well. And they also get information from internally from their body, but we're talking about the external information that's coming through. The incoming goes into the mainframe, the computer, and the computer in the dog is fascinating because as well as the mainframe, they have a series of CPGs, which are central processing generators or central patterning generators. And this is what I'm going to talk about this evening because they drive dog walking, drive dog gait, and they drive swimming. So we're going to look out of the 4 kinds of movements dogs do, we're going to look at the one that they innately do and we're hooking into as therapists. So we're just going to think about the different types of motion that they've got. I'm just going to move on to a slide. So, what is canine hydrotherapy to you? What I absolutely know, it's about the interaction between the therapist and the dog. And we want that to be a very positive, therapeutic interaction. It isn't about the pool or the treadmill. They don't treat the dog. You treat the dog as a therapist, and the pool or the treadmill are your main facilities that you're going to carry out your treatment plan in. So there's lots of different types of products out there, and so making your choice will be dependent if you've inherited a pool or a treadmill, or you're going to opt and choose for one or the other, or you're in a position where you have both. And there's lots of factors to consider. If you have both and you're a lone practitioner, that means one of your products won't be used, and that's a bit of an issue when you're looking at the overheads and the enormous setup costs for hydrotherapy. So the pool comes in lots of different types, and you can have ground level pools, half in and half out, which is the one we have at Canine HS, and you can have them standing where you've had to raise the floor up. Ground level pools are a real issue biomechanically for the dog because behaviorally the dog checks in with their owners, and when you've got a ground level pool, no matter what position you get your owners in, the dog's going to be extending excessively their neck when they check in and then affecting the natural balance of their core. So we have a pool half in, half out as part of our clinic enrichment, and we get our owners to sit down so they're on eye level with their dog. The underwater treadmill, that's a bit lower where the dogs are positioned. So again, you've got to think of your clinical enrichment, which is part of movement enrichment, to maximize the opportunities the dog has to comfortably check in and out with their owners. So you might be wondering what clinic enrichment is. So if you've heard of feeding enrichment, which is the whole rage now, which is followed on from environmental enrichment, movement enrichment is what therapists are all about, working with the dogs. And let's just move to the next slide. So we've got lots of choices, and I want you to think about it. Historically, people would say that we would be swimming in a pool or walking in a treadmill. You've got to think outside the box. They're just pieces of equipment that we can modify and fit to our treatment program to meet the specific needs of each dog that we're seeing, depending on what they need. So different types of products. You have liner pools, and there are issues with those, having leaks with the dog claws, with the chlorine, and also challenges of how you may position internal ramps, but everything's got a solution. Now, I know lots of people who use liner pools with great success. You can have tile pools. Unfortunately, they can be a bit slippy underfoot, and you've got issues with the grout. The pool we have at Canine HS is a polypropylene pool, half in, half out, and we put a lot of extra insulation to try and limit the loss of heat out of the pool to save on the running costs of these expensive pieces of equipment. And about 10, 12 years ago, I introduced the idea of putting, they were metal at the time, underwater pods and platforms into the pool to expand the opportunities of the different treatment techniques we could use a hydrotherapy pool for. I think in the industry, everyone who's working in hydrotherapy realizes the pool is a hydro pool, not a swimming pool. And currently we've got quite a small pool, and we have successfully rehabilitated giant breeds in that regularly. with no issue, because it isn't necessarily about swimming. It's more about therapeutic treatment techniques that you're administering with the dog working with you to meet the goals of your plan, to meet the goals of your treatment plans. So you can have these pods now, which are fiberglass. If you haven't got those, people have tables that they're putting in, as long as they're plastic. The challenge of anything that goes in the hydrotherapy pool is always the sanitizer, the chlorine or the bromine. And chlorine can be very proactive at aging equipment that you put into the pool or causing problems with it. The underwater treadmill, there's lots of different types of underwater treadmill. There are some single doors. And again, looking at the design for the dog, you really want to be thinking of 2-door treadmill where the dog can enter and access it in and go out, because that maps in directly to how the dog's designed. Otherwise, you need a wide enough treadmill. Ours is very wide when we get our therapists in, where the dog could turn around and have some movement choices. But a lot of the treadmills are quite small and snug. And the comparison is they're both sort of a piece of equipment to hold sanitized warm water in to administer your hydrotherapy treatment techniques in. And again, with the underwater treadmill, you have this one particularly is an interesting design because we can work it as a land-based or underwater treadmill. And we'll talk about how enriching the transitions are in proprioceptively enriching when we change the transitions and the timings, whether you're working in the pool or in the treadmill as well. So in the pool, we have ramps that go in for access and underwater platforms. And we also use the ramp as the external ramp going up therapeutically. We're not just using it for access. So we're looking at the size of that ramp and the pitch of that ramp to use it for our therapeutic eccentric and concentric muscle work. So our inclines and declines are therapeutically part of the treatment, not just to access the pool. Again, with the underwater treadmill, we've designed some ramps because a lot of the products you get have very steep short ramps. And so we're looking at using ramps into and out of that underwater treadmill therapeutically to do some eccentric muscle work, which is essential, as you will know that the majority of canine movement is eccentric loading for the muscles. So we need to incorporate that into some part of the program. So thinking about, let's move on to another slide. Thinking about these central pattern generators. Hopefully you can see the picture there. So the underwater treadmill, we're using that dynamically in those pictures, but I want to sort of have a think about human practice. My default, my background is I'm a chartered physiotherapist. I qualified in 1982. I am still a chartered physiotherapist, but I work full-time with dogs and full-time with teaching as well. And if you're getting a human up, or you're helping them recover after trauma or surgery, or they've had some neurological condition or orthopedic problem, as a human physio, we don't get them up and drag them along and walk them. We have a huge amount of work that we do in a static position. We work at transitions, we work at balance and coordination, we work at transfers, and it's really important for the animal and the human to get balance and be in their natural state of balance before they stride out and take a step. And so we do a huge amount of work in both the pool and the underwater treadmill that's static, because we are aligning the dog, engaging the dog. Think of it as canine Pilates and canine Tai Chi. And we know from research these are incredibly effective as part of a treatment program. Here we're using the treadmill dynamically where we've got the belt moving. And I want to talk a little bit about water levels because that's come up. I get that question a huge amount. When the water level is low, I want you to think about when you walk on the beach, and you go into the water. And a few years ago, actually, I got a video from someone who went on an amazing holiday, and they were walking through the water on the Maldives towards their beautiful house where they were staying, and it was ankle depth. Now, if you're ankle depth in the water, the resistance is lower, okay, because lower, and when you have the water in the sea come up to your mid leg, your tibia fibula, halfway up, you can feel that you are having to use more muscle power, you're having to use more energy to move forward through that water. And if the water is at your thigh level, okay, and you're moving in the sea and you've got the sea at your thigh level, you're using a huge amount of effort to move from the water, through the water. So we need to think about the resistance that's offered at different water levels. When you see a dog and the underwater treadmill is filling up, you will see often that they'll lift their paws up. And what this is proprioception. This is their body awareness, because they are geared very different to humans. And their proprioceptive system is very different, the way it engages in their movement. They are very much automated compared to us. So when they are walking through water, that's one issue. When they're static, that's another issue. So when we're walking them through water, you'll have less resistance with the water being lower. However, it depends on the speed of the dog. And what you will have is you'll have more range of motion happening higher up. And with greater range of motion, because they're picking their paws up through that, you're going to have more muscle work. So you may want to use your water levels in your underwater treadmill and your pool to have different effects. So if you want more buoyancy, greater buoyancy, you will have the water higher and do your static work. Okay. If you ask the dog to move with the water level really high, it's going to be a huge resistance through that water, because it's about the size of the body or the size of the structure that's displacing the water in it. That's physics, it's not me. So force is mass times acceleration. So you can use static work and you can use dynamic work to have different effects. Now in the pool, the issue with that is that your water level, when you change it, unless you've got a very small pool, can take quite a long time. But in our pool, we do alter the water levels to give the dogs more buoyancy. It's wonderful for the elderly dogs where they can really stretch out, and because on land they don't have that opportunity because they're struggling, maybe in rising, maybe in their transitions on turning, they're getting a bit stiff. And then we can lower it to help them feel grounded. We can lower it even more then to have that effect, and we can walk them on the underwater pods and the underwater platforms. So again, these facilities are not restricted to one piece of equipment or the other, but obviously with the underwater treadmill, you've got a much smaller body of water, so you can vary your water levels more easily than you can in the pool. So this is just to let you think about a little bit about the opportunities of how you can use the different pieces of equipment. So you can use the different pieces of equipment to do a swimming action, which is using therapeutic handling and alignment in those pictures, where we're engaging with the dog and the dog is actively working with us. Or we can work them completely on the pods. We can have the pods lined up in a row, or we can have single pods, then a gap of water, single pods. But essentially the CPGs are responsible for driving swimming and for driving gait. And what we're doing as therapists is we're applying manual techniques through therapeutic handling, movement shaping, alignment, to engage the dog efficiently in their natural balanced motion, whether it's a walking action or whether it's a swimming action, which is very, very different to the dog walking by itself or the dog swimming by itself. And because of that, we're getting some amazing responses. So just going to unfocus that. So my IT tech, so I hope that's been a little bit interesting there. I'd like to talk about humidity levels now as well. So humidity is a major issue, because the bottom line is always safe practice. And safe practice is making sure you've got adequate ventilation and the humidity levels are controlled, particularly for the different kinds of dogs that you may be involved with. So with a pool, you have a more controlled environment with good ventilation because the dog's higher up in the water. And so that may suit some breeds rather, and some breeds with particular problems, more than an underwater treadmill, where if you go in the underwater treadmill and go really low down, you've got the glass around you and the humidity levels there can pick up. So again, problem solving by using great dehumidification systems, fans, good ventilation systems to ensure that you're controlling your humidity with either piece of equipment is really important. The dog's designed to go forwards in a straight line, so you're going to swim the dog in a straight line, you're going to walk the dog in a straight line in the underwater treadmill, but that's going to be only part of the treatment plan, because such an important part is natural balanced stance, natural balanced engagement, coordination, and we can do that in water. It's a gift for hydrotherapists because it's very relevant to how dogs move. The swimming action is incredibly proprioceptively enriched when you use therapeutic handling, and so is the work in the underwater treadmill. So just going back onto the PowerPoint. And just moving to the next slide. So this is where, again, it's just about our perspectives, and I'm just trying to bring something for you to think about how you use the different bits of equipment. So you can design ramps to work with your pool or your underwater treadmill. We have problems of positioning treadmills and pools because they take up space. So looking at the size, you definitely need to have drainage in your room for both of them. You definitely need to have a supply of water. This lovely terrier, we're doing some balance work and alignment work and engagement work in standing. Then you can fill up the treadmill and you can use a swimming action, which you are aligning. And then when you lower your water level, you can go into gait patterning, and the transitions from that movement of free swimming action that is guided by the therapist into a walking action is incredibly proprioceptively enriching and has a direct effect on the movement sequencing and patterning of the dog. You can do that in the pool as well. So you can be using the pool to do a swimming action that you're using therapeutic handling and balancing the dog in its natural buoyancy in a swing movement pattern. And then you can ask them to go on to the underwater pods and engage in a gait pattern that you control and direct. Again, both of those are massively proprioceptively enriching. So using your equipment, you can think about how you can maximize the equipment to work for you to deliver your program to the dog in your care, rather than thinking the treadmill's treating the dog or the pool's treating the dog. They're just the facility you're using. It's all about you and it's all about the dog. So this wonderful dog is 15 years old and close to my heart. And we keep this wonderful dog at her very best by doing work in the pool. It doesn't mean we're swimming her. She's doing work on the underwater pod. She may do a small amount of straight line sequencing to reinforce the static work. So we combine static work with dynamic work. She's also finds using the treadmill for the same dog who's elderly and struggling a little bit with her back end. So here, this is where you're raising the water and you're utilizing the buoyancy, the warm water, and we're doing some controlled half sit or hover sits with support for an elderly dog to her standing position, which is a functional action that she needs for toileting, and then she goes back onto the lap. So we're using this without movement to significantly improve her toileting function on land. It's all about using the parameters in these amazing bits of equipment to engage the proprioceptive system, to engage the muscle system, which is the engine of the dog, to engage the proprioceptive system, which commands the muscles, to help their land-based function and movement. There's very little to do with swimming or walking. It's about therapy in water. And it's incredibly exciting if you use therapeutic handling, because what we do is we get the dog to actively engage with us. And what that means is they consciously mediate. Conscious mediation is the part of their brain where they decide to actively work with us. And because they do that, it's very proprioceptively enriching. So movement enrichment and therapeutic handling, clinic enrichment, if you want to know more about those, we cover those in a lot of our courses, but they're incredibly exciting treatment techniques to put into your treatment toolbox that have profound effect on the quality of movement and function of the dog on land, and improves the quality of their life on land, improves their fitness, improves their conditioning. So I'm going to have a little look at some of the questions now. So we'll just come back here and okay. So let's have a look at some of the questions. I'm going to jump to the poll first. So what have we got so far on the poll? So we've got hydro pools edged slightly forward with the aquatic treadmill, but the underwater aquatic treadmill was leading the way. The hydrotherapy pool, again, it's not a swimming pool, it's a hydro pool. We've got some not sure votes, but actually, a lot of people are saying both, and that's going up. So that's really interesting. But thinking about how you use the products, I think currently the pools, depending on the size you purchase, are slightly more reasonable financially than the treadmills. I think we know from research the treadmills have more downtime than the pools, so that's an issue to think about. Without being able to use your facility and you've got downtime, obviously you don't have any income coming in. If you have both, but there's only one therapist, that means one piece of equipment isn't being used and generating income, so that's an issue as well. We've talked about the humidity. We've talked about maybe considering the ways you use the treadmill and the pool, slightly outside the box perhaps for some people who've traditionally seen lots of videos of swimming and walking or trotting. It's never about the speed, it's about the quality of the movement that the proprioceptive system engages. It's about what happens with their movement on land that we're really interested in. So the polls moving around a little bit there. So we've got loads of questions. So the first question with 11 votes. So this has been upvoted. What conditions, and this is from Harriet. Hello, Harriet. What conditions are best for underwater treadmill versus pool? Is a combination of treadmill and pool beneficial? What areas does the incline on the underwater treadmill target? Wow, 3 questions. Okay, where to start? As a hydrotherapist and a physiotherapist, I don't look at the facilities I use to treat a condition. I'm treating the dog, and the dog comes with behaviors, and it may have pain issues, and it's working in an unusual environment. So that for me is a starting point. Which piece of equipment would best fit each dog that happens to have a condition or a problem? So I think historically people would say you put this condition in this and that condition in another. Depends how you use them. So I think there are some areas like neurological, because I'm a neurophysio, it's my speciality, and a neuroveterinary physio, where we're more prone to put a neurological issue that the dog is experiencing perhaps in the treadmill. However, we'll use the pool with underwater pods like a treadmill, and they won't be doing any swimming. So again, it depends how you use that piece of equipment to deliver the program that you've devised from your assessment and your problem list, and then you've clinically reasoned to your goals and clinically reasoned to your treatment techniques that you're going to use from your therapeutic toolbox. A combination of treadmill and pool beneficial. Again, they both offer a proprioceptive enriched environment when you use therapeutic handling. They both are a body of warm, sanitized water. They both give you options of movement, and so you've got static work and dynamic work. Research shows that if you've got one or the other, you will have a preference because that's where your skill lies, and that's very reasonable. I definitely prefer the hydro pool for me because I have a hip and knee issue, and I find my position in the treadmill very uncomfortable for length of time, whereas I can stand up in the pool. So, and also in the pool, I can do more movement shaping for the dog, and I can move around the dog, which I prefer. Whereas in the underwater treadmill, you're behind the dog very often, and I have a back issue. So stooping and leaning forwards for me is a bit of an issue. So I want to choose the equipment that works best for the dogs and the dog's behaviors, which one they will cope with best, and to meet the goals. And I actually find both of them brilliant if you use therapeutic handling and movement enrichment. What area does the incline on the underwater treadmill target? It's really interesting. So incline work and decline work, we should have a whole talk on that because it's the latest thing. Incline work, if you're going to do therapeutic incline work, is concentric loading of the muscles. And the underwater treadmill we have, which is a prototype and we're trying out, we use decline because decline is eccentric loading. And if we're going to do fitness and conditioning, we'll use the decline because we want to maximize the eccentric loading, considering that agility dogs, 100% of their movement is eccentric loading. So we want to fit the incline and decline work with the dog. We can also offer that with our internal ramps in the pool. And so I think it's understanding what the needs of each dog are before you decide whether you're going to use the incline or not. I hope, Harriet, that answers some of your questions. A combination of treadmill and pool, beneficial. We have some dogs that go in either, and we use that to not depending on the availability, but we use that maybe to change it up a little bit. But very often it's about the dog's behaviors in the clinical environment. That's our lead, because we want to make sure the dog is not moving into flight or fright. We want to make sure the dog is not fooling around and messing around. There's no opportunity for a dog to just be swimming randomly or walking randomly. It's all very organized with that therapeutic interaction between the therapist and the dog using that Y-shaped harness and therapeutic handling. I think, sorry, Harriet, I've made a mistake. I should have clicked on answering that. So I've given a big answer there and it hasn't been recorded. So opinion on spinal cases and swimming versus treadmill. So I'll just bring that down a bit. From Becky B. Hello, Becky. So opinion on spinal cases and swimming versus treadmill. I think spinal cases, as in dogs with neurological problems, again, I think it's understanding the scope of your practice. I think it's understanding the dog's behaviors. It's liaising really closely with your multidisciplinary team, with your referring vet, and also with your skills and knowledge of the complexities of your neurological case. And I'm not swimming in a pool. I'm using a pool to administer my therapeutic treatment program for that neurological case. Or I'll be using the treadmill. So for that neurological case to put together a very proprioceptively enriched program to meet their specific needs. I think probably dogs who've had any kind of neck surgery, historically they'd say in a treadmill, not in a pool. Again, it depends how you use them. We have underwater platforms and pods where the dogs are on those at all times and they're not using a swimming action. We're doing static work and we're using dynamic gait patterning work on the underwater platforms. And again, with the underwater treadmill, we're using a lot of static work. Okay, so at what speed to start the underwater treadmill? Brilliant question. Thank you very much, Christina. Oh, I've just had something upvoted, so let me just have a little look. So, Richard, I was just answering a question, Richard, and yours has come in. So start answering that. Let me just see. So when choosing, again with the Crowdcast, I'm new to this, so thank you for hanging in there with me. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to click the button. So when I start answering the question. You can find it in the replay, but I think I've probably caused chaos already. So, Richard, a long question. When choosing between one or the other, there are many points you have to take into account, like available size of the room and where you're going to have the underwater treadmill or pool, the financial cost, and many others. Absolutely agree. Underwater treadmills look small, and when you go and see them, they look quite small compared to a pool, and people get rooms, and so many people have a room that they can't actually get the underwater treadmill in through the door because it hasn't been measured, or when they're in the room, the access into the underwater treadmill and the exit has limited. So sometimes you can put your underwater treadmill diagonally into the room. You need ramps to access, and you need those ramps for those therapeutic treatment techniques that make all the difference. After your water-based work, you then move on to land-based work, and it integrates it together to get amazing results. Financial cost, again, shopping around, and there's secondhand equipment that you can get as well. A lot of people are challenged with the pool that maybe they're not allowed to dig into the space that they're renting if they don't own it. And the pool, there's lots of different pool suppliers. And I think the thing is, you need to ask the therapists who are using these bits of equipment and go and see what therapists are using in a clinical setting to guide you. Richard, amongst them, you say you think physical condition of the therapist is important. It's absolutely vital. You've invested a huge amount of money in some very expensive equipment. You do not want to wreck yourself in months. You want longevity because you've invested all this time to build your skills. You're passionate about the dogs, and you're setting up for a career change or progressing your career along your journey. You're setting up equipment that's incredibly expensive to run as well compared to office space or land-based therapy space. So you want longevity. You want to look after yourself. It's really important to look after your back and your joints. And then amongst them, the physical condition of the therapist, but in the case of not being able to fit a pool, which you think is more comfortable, you're a tall man, okay? How would you work around the awkward position you're in the underwater treadmill? You have to have breaks, okay? You have to manage your diary really effectively. So you have different size dogs and different dogs coming in with different problems. So you're not always working in that same position. You have to look after your back and look at the manual handling that you're doing over 24 hours. A lot of the handling you're going to do is not necessarily with the dog, but closing down your clinic, moving things around. Knee pads, Richard, yeah, they're great. Unfortunately, with knee pads, they move around and sometimes they can be a bit of a problem because they don't stay in place, and that can actually cause you more issues. Again, looking at the design of the treadmill, so the treadmill we've got has got very wide foot placements for us because we want to kneel on that and we want to position our feet on that. And if you've got a treadmill that has sloped sides or raised plates, they're very uncomfortable and you're squatting, so you're doing a lot of muscle work over time. So I think that's a really important thing for therapists to think about, is their longevity. So really look after your body. Right, I'm going to go back to Christina and try and get this right. Okay, at what speed, Christina, to start the underwater treadmill? How many stops to do? How do we understand that for the animal it's hard or too slow? So this is where we have to think about the dog's natural balance stance and natural balance motion. We all have, depending on our leg length, our height, our size, a natural balance cadence that we move in. So think about when you go out to the shops and you're walking with your friend and you're having a look in all the January sales, and they're very tall and you're like me, quite short. I have to walk at a higher frequency than the person next to me who has a longer stride length and a lower frequency. So my stride length, my natural stride length will be adapted. And what I'll do is I'll try and catch up every third or fourth step. So I'm out of my natural balance cadence. And then my really tall friend, who's got long legs and a longer stride length and a lower frequency, may slow down and move out of their natural motion or their natural cadence. And it's uncomfortable. So the underwater treadmill, you're going to start to fit each dog's stride length and stride frequency. So little dogs tend to break into a trot naturally. You're also going to choose the gait pattern that they prefer. And what you're trying to do, if you go too slow, it's a bit tricky for the dog. If you go too fast, it's a bit tricky for the dog. This is where the art of hydrotherapy is so important. You're making a clinical judgment of the best quality movement for the dog, so the right speed, okay? And if the dog's going too fast or the dog's going too slow, you'll see the quality of the movement deteriorate. And that's where you're going to work really hard to be doing a small amount of high quality movement and then slowing it down and going back to your static work and then presuming that. It isn't about turning on the treadmill and just walking them repeatedly. And you'll find you'll get such amazing results if you combine static work with dynamic work, and then you do some land-based work, whether it's in your treadmill that you've emptied the water out and you're using as a land-based treadmill, or whether you're using it as your ramps, and some of the different land-based movement shaping that you can do as well. I hope that helps, Christina. In the water treadmill, thank you, Danica, which has just moved. Hang on, sorry, I'm moving the questions and they're jumping around. Okay, sorry, you're upvoting, so I'll go to the top one there. Okay, Danielle. How do you get a dog used to an underwater treadmill if it's really nervous for the first few times? That is such a brilliant question, Danielle, and something I'm asked repeatedly. And this is where it's so important to use therapeutic handling. And therapeutic handling is part of movement enrichment. It's about building a natural bond with the dog, which is a professional bond of confidence and trust. And we're going to use T-touch techniques. We're going to use key points of control. Oh, am I highlighting the question? Sorry, Bernadette, are you giving me a prompt? Oh, sorry, so I don't know if I can. IT moment here. I'll try my hardest, Bernadette. So the question is, how do we get a dog used to an underwater treadmill if it's really nervous those first few times? So we're going to use movement enrichment techniques, which encompasses clinic enrichment and therapeutic handling. And therapeutic handling encompasses T-touch, key points of control, movement shaping, and it's about building a professional bond of trust and confidence with each dog in your care. We are definitely going to do walkthroughs, and we're going to be walking the dog in balance on land, and we're going to use a whole range of strategies, bringing the dog's towels and scent into the area, making it fun, and taking our time to get their confidence. And some dogs will have several walkthroughs, others will be one walkthrough, and then we would then take them in. So again, that's a brilliant question. Well done, and I hope that helps. So let me just go back to the screen, and we've got, I'm just going to bear with me there. Got one last slide, and it's a very important slide because it's of a very important dog, and I am just having a bit of a blinding moment where I've got to find my slides. I've had so much help. Thank you so much for everyone who's helped me with the IT with this. I mean, this is like an adventure for me. It's like the worst for me than doing any exam in my life, trying to figure out IT and not fluff up, but you know, it's live. This is what happens. This dog, 15 and a half, a soulmate of mine. And this is what we do. We work with dogs in partnership, working together, and your tools are your hands, your tools are your back. Dogs communicate directly by movement shaping and by facial posturing and body posturing. And so we map into that with our therapeutic handling, and we use methods to relate directly to the dog, to build their confidence, to work with us. Because if they decide to actively and consciously mediate, it's hugely proprioceptively enriched. And this is a message we've been sending out. And Maria Johnson has been working with me for a long time. We've been sending out on our level 3 courses, and we send out on our level 5. I've sent out on the university courses at the Royal Veterinary College and Nottingham Vet School. It's about working in partnership with the dog to build that professional bond of trust, which is so important to therapists, and it is the best job in the world. Okay, so sorry, Harriet, I think I messed up on that one. So Becky Marchand, hello. The question is, could you please give some examples of static work that would be suited to different conditions? Thank you. Thank you, Mel Bruder. It is a lovely photo of that dog. We have lots of pictures of that wonderful dog as a younger dog, but that is my favorite picture of all time. So Becky, really nice that you've joined us and hope you're finding it interesting. So static work that will be suited to different conditions. Again, think of the dog and the challenges they've got, because when they come to you, you're not treating their hip, you're not treating their neck, you're not treating their age, you're treating the dog that's got those problems. So static work is brilliant for every dog. And just as humans do static balance work and conditioning work, and then they step into dynamic work, you can do the same. So we can do rhythmical stabilizations, we can do proprioceptive paw placement, we can do alignment techniques, and all of these are covered in our level 5 course, and we teach this at level 3 as well. So we want to share as much as we can with you so you get amazing results. We can chunk down the different parts of toileting for the older dog, and we can use those, and we can introduce a sort of canine Pilates approach where they're very subtle movement shifts. We always do in the sagittal plane. On humans, a lot of balance work you're doing side to side. In dogs, it's all about forwards and backwards because that's how they move. And dogs don't have rotational movements at their joints like humans. So you have to have specific techniques for the dogs in your care. You can't just translate human techniques onto dogs just like you can't onto horses or any other species. And canine species are a species alone. So your techniques you use on your cats are really different to the techniques you would opt to use on your dogs, but they're the same concept. It's working with the dog. I hope that helps, Becky. Oh, I've got someone, Charlotte. I'm looking forward to hearing about the science behind your recommendation of not doing backing up and ABAD work with dogs. Well, backing up is going to really challenge the caudal cruciate ligament. We know that, it's a fact. Dogs don't need to back up if they're naturally doing it because they live in a tiny cottage and they've learned that. So let's talk about natural balance motion and motor unit recruitment. It's a great question. So motor unit recruitment, thank you, Becky. Motor unit recruitment is about learned patterns of movements, and that's really important to humans, not so important to dogs. Okay, so motor unit recruitment is what you did when you were small and you learned to write. It's what you do when you learn to do up buttons, drink tea, play an instrument. When you learned to swim, you learned a series of sequences that you had to repeat and repeat and repeat until you acquired a new skill. Dogs are completely different because of the way of their neural networking is wired up. Their movement, as in walking and swimming, is directed directly from their CPGs, not like in humans. Our movement is more cortically organized. So inherently, innate within the dog are design features of moving forwards in a straight line. If you insist on moving a dog in backing up techniques, yes, it's proprioceptively enriching, but it's working outside the design features. And also it's going to over-challenge some of the biomechanical design features, which we don't want to upset that. The other thing is, it's about forward motion. So usually in competition work and athletic work and dogs, they're moving forwards in a straight line, they're moving forwards and turning. Simplest movements are straight line movement. More complex is starting, stopping and turning. So using movement patterns the dog uses inherently in their natural balance motion, which is really important to them, rather than using motor unit recruitment, which is training them to do a sequence that they repeat, get a reward and bring out. So sitting a dog up to beg, backing a dog, they're not that useful to them day in, day out. So I have to really probe why, as a therapist, I would be exploring that when I'm trying to improve their movement and function and their fitness and conditioning to do forward motion work. So it's about being really specific to what dogs need. And they're great techniques for humans you know, but for canines, I want to make it really relevant to the work that they're doing and the lifestyles that they're doing and their innate design features, which is all about natural balanced motion, not about motor unit recruitment training, where you're teaching them to do an activity rather than hooking into the way they naturally move to enhance that. I hope that helps Charlotte a little bit. Another question, in the water treadmill, what is a good time to aim for per set on their first session? I usually go for between 1 to 2 minutes, maybe even less depending on the dog's condition. What's your opinion? Thank you, Danica. Again, a great question, because a lot of people are asking, like on their first session, what do they do? We don't time dogs as in times. We fit a program specifically to meet what that dog needs on that day. And it may be just static work. It may be we do walkthroughs and just get them used to that environment. It might be we move the underwater belt, but we might not. So we're going to be very specific. And then how we find out whether the dog is coping with it is we're going to read their calming signals. We're going to use our T-touch approaches, our therapeutic handling, and we're going to palpate their muscles, and we're looking for fasciculation, because as soon as the weaker muscles fatigue, they switch off. And so we don't want to be using movement, whether it's dynamic movement or static work, and taking the dog into fatigue. You always want to set your dog up to achieve, and particularly for your neurological cases, you should never fatigue them. It's all about recruiting the muscles to work and balancing out the abnormal patterning that they're experiencing. I hope that helps a little bit, Danica. A great question, well done. So, got time for a couple more questions. When we have access, this is from, oh, another one from Danica, brilliant. When we have access to a pool and a water treadmill, how beneficial is it to combine treatments in 2 different sessions? I'm not quite sure. Oh, I see, treadmill, 1 session, pool, the next alternating. Again, that can be very challenging for the dog, so it depends on each dog's behavior. So if the dog is settled and working well and you're getting improvement, I would stick with the piece of equipment that you've got where you're getting the results. It's not necessarily moving them around. We do that occasionally, but we also want the dog to consciously mediate and actually join in there. We want their active participation, and for that we need to build their confidence in a very strange environment with us. Our hands are we're using them on the dogs at all times to use for therapeutic handling, and also as manual transmission of our different treatment techniques, like alignment, like proprioceptive paw placement, like balance work and body work, myofascial release techniques, massage therapies. And so thinking about what fits the dog best, I think is a really good way to go. I hope that helps. Thanks, Danica. Claire, hello Claire. Really looking forward to seeing you next week. When choosing a model of treadmill, underwater treadmill, are there any features which you feel are the most relevant and the most useful to enriching each treatment? I think that's a great question, and the trouble is we're a little bit limited as therapists by the products that are out there, and they are listening and they do design them and respond, but it's slower than maybe what we need. Definitely a 2-door treadmill. And we've got a very wide treadmill, so dogs can comfortably move around if they want to. Some treadmills are narrower, and I think to ask a dog to turn around is a more complicated sequence of movement. So it's much harder for a dog to stop, start, and change direction, whereas moving in a straight line, you'll often hear that where people say, once they're moving in a straight line, they're really working quite well. They don't look too bad. If they go faster, we can't see their lane. So again, this is where we're going to be thinking of the speed we work dogs in, the balance we work them in, the environment we work them in, the water levels. And so I think that's really important. Looking at the ramps that come with treadmills, that some of them don't have ramps, or you get them as additional to attach on. Some of them are very steep. So you might look at that and think, well, that's an area that I will actually develop and get someone else to develop a product. So you could use therapeutic ramps in and out of the treadmill, might work. And I think like the enrichment for each treatment, I think the clinic enrichment is about what your choices as a therapist are, Claire, where you cite everything, where you position your motivators like your owners, your treats. If dogs like a Labrador Retriever are so motivated that they are desperate to get to the treat, they'll move out of balance, and they'll also, it won't be that useful a movement. So again, making your choices as a therapist, you're the person who's going to enrich that experience for them. And another way we have found is really useful is dogs that, going back to Danica's question, dogs that are a bit worried about going into the treadmill will very often lay, not a treat trail, but will very often lay a towel trail of their own towels, because it brings scent into the equipment and they really feel that's like a portable hug. It gives them that confidence to work in the environments with us. I hope that helps, Claire. Right, and Bernadette. Hello, Bernadette from France. I'm going to remember to press the button. Right, your question is, I'm currently working with a dog where we move from shower to pool to treadmill with underwater hydromassage and treadmill in the same session. You're not mad, Bernadette. You're an advanced level 5 diploma hydrotherapist, and I know you will have reasoned that out for that individual dog. So it's all about your clinical reasoning and making sure you do the best for each dog. I find doing things simply and doing them really well and repeating them, and then if it works, sticking with that rather than adding too much. But if it's a dog that really thrives from those changes, or the behaviors demand that you're doing different things, absolutely fantastic. So as long as you're clinically reasoning out your treatment program and you're not just using every tool in your therapeutic toolbox, which is huge, that's fantastic. I hope that helps, Bernadette. Maxine, hello. How do you run any CPD? Do you run any CPD days for therapists, and where can we find information on them? Thanks. Lovely question, Maxine. Yes, we run loads of CPD days for therapists, and you can choose. We have clinical placement days for 1 or 2 therapists. We have different courses. We've got online video information. If you go to caninehscourses.com, have a look around our new website. And if you're interested in arranging a specific day on a specific topic or doing some treatment techniques with us in our clinics, it's just a case of emailing me at info@caninehscourses.com, and I hope that helps. Okay. Sandra. Hello, Sandra. Where can we get the pods and platforms for the pool? Well, that's an interesting one. They're my designs, and I got someone to create my designs into something I could use in the pool, and they keep evolving. So I don't know where you get them, but I think really to start is a really good place is just go and find a plastic table from B&Q. It's got to be plastic if you're in chlorine, because anything with metal disintegrates and deteriorates very quickly. You don't want rust in your pool. You don't want iron to go into your pool water. And then you can, underneath the plastic table, you can attach those kind of weights that you can get, like those grey plastic weights with car ties, so you don't have a floating pod or platform. Or you can contact various manufacturers and get something bespoke made up for yourself as well. So really, sky's the limit. It's thinking outside the box. It's getting someone to create something for you. But if you want more information, please don't hesitate to email me at info@caninehscourses.com, and we can go from there. Thank you, Sandra. So Danica, again, great questions. I've been trained to put dogs with forelimb issues in the pool and not in the treadmill because of their weight distribution. Can you give your opinion? Okay, so forelimb issues for dogs are a great challenge because 2/3 of their body weight are going through them. So we get great results in addressing forelimb issues in the pool and also in the treadmill. Again, it isn't about putting a particular problem in one or other. It's probably looking at maybe expanding some treatment techniques in the treadmill and using the static work, place proprioceptive paw placement work, alignment, using the water levels to give that buoyancy. So if you're in the pool, you can get the dog deeper on an underwater platform, but you can do that in the treadmill as well and take the water straight up. So I don't look at the equipment as limiting what I can offer, either a hydro pool or a treadmill for a fallen issue. And I hope that helps with that question. So I don't know if I've come to the end of that. So let's just go back. So I've really enjoyed this, and please do tell me if you found this useful. Let's go back to the polls. And we've got Aquatic Treadmill, Hydro Pool, just a little bit ahead of it now, both way out there. Absolutely, it's about what you can do in the equipment. The equipment is not treating the dog, it's you, your interaction with the dog. It's all about their engagement with you. It's all about using therapeutic handling, setting the dog up to achieve. It's that individual assessment to create a problem list, which you then clinically reason into your goal planning. And from your goal planning, you go to your therapeutic treatment toolbox and you look in there and you select something specific to work with the dog and not on the dog. And you get amazing results, and it's just the best job in the world. And I've had quite a lot of emails and messages about natural balance motion, where it's got a bit confused perhaps with motor unit recruitment. So I think next month's live chat, I'd really like to explore that and bring some articles and bring some of the science through for you, because I think when you realize that, you'll be able to reason out the treatment techniques that work the best for you in the equipment that you're working in. So it's been fantastic. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much. I've really been challenged with the IT again, but I've loved it. And let me know what you think about Crowdcast, about being able to ask questions, about a poll, about having a chat room. I'm hoping that's working for you and not just relying on webinars that are on a case or just a PowerPoint. So I'm hoping that interaction really works for you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And if you're interested, do look out. We will announce the date for next month's event. It will be a live event again. And just remember, if you're listening to this on the replay, remember the chat room's closed. I had quite a lot of questions afterwards when we ended the event, and I felt really bad I couldn't answer those questions for you. Okay, cheerio, everybody, and just enjoy that work with those dogs. They are just amazing, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful job to be involved with. Bye. Bye for now.